My mother is the director of our regional blood bank, a pillar of the community. I just discovered she has been secretly selling the rarest blood types to a private, black market blood concierge service for the ultra-wealthy, replacing the stock with standard O-negative blood. The discovery wasn't a single cinematic moment. It was a slow, creeping dread that began in the sterile quiet of the inventory logs. I was helping her out for the summer, a break from my pre-med studies, a way to be useful. My job was simple: cross-reference the digital records with the physical cryofreezer manifests. It was supposed to be mindless, a task for a college kid. But the numbers weren't adding up. Tiny discrepancies at first. A single pint of B-negative logged out for cross-contamination disposal that never appeared on the disposal paperwork. Then an entire crate of AB-negative, one of the rarer types, marked as transferred to St. Jude's Regional Annex, a facility that I knew had been closed for 3 years. I thought it was a clerical error, a ghost in the machine. I even mentioned it to her, laughing about the old system's quirks. She just smiled, that placid, reassuring smile of hers, the one she gave to nervous first-time donors, and said she'd look into it. The real truth began to unravel late one Tuesday night. I had stayed behind to finish a data migration project, and the building was silent except for the low, constant hum of the refrigerators. It's a sound I've known my whole life, the white noise of my mother's world. But that night, I heard another hum, fainter, from a back storage room we rarely used. The door was always locked. It was labeled Bio-Waste Overflow, a place I had no reason or desire to enter. But I was curious. And the key, a heavy, old-fashioned brass one, was on the master ring she sometimes left in her desk drawer, a drawer she never locked. She trusted me. The thought is a cold stone in my gut now. Inside, the air was frigid. It wasn't a forgotten storage room. It was a meticulously organized private lab. In the center stood a single, state-of-the-art cryofreezer, a sleek, black monolith, completely unlike the standard-issue stainless steel units that lined the main storage hall. It was whisper quiet. There was no institutional logo on it, no government asset tag. It didn't belong. My breath plumed in the cold air as I unlatched the heavy door. Inside, nestled in custom-molded foam, were not bags, but vials, small glass vials with silver caps, each bearing a label printed with a long alphanumeric code, and, beneath it, a name. Not a patient number, a name. I recognized one immediately: Alistair Finch, the tech billionaire who had a sprawling estate on the other side of the county. The label also had a blood type designation I'd only ever read about in advanced hematology textbooks. RH null, golden blood, the rarest on Earth. That's when I saw her personal laptop, sitting on a small steel desk in the corner, humming softly on its charger. It wasn't her work-issued machine. It was her one from home. Her password was the name of our old golden retriever, Samson. It took me less than a minute to find the encrypted folder, and less than 5 to break the password on that, too. It was my birthday. Inside were the ledgers, spreadsheets detailing transactions, wire transfers from offshore accounts, and a client list that read like a who's who of the global elite. Each entry corresponded to a pint of rare blood: Kell negative, Duffy null, Bombay phenotype, procured from our public stock, sold for hundreds of thousands of dollars, and replaced with O-neg, the universal donor. A perfect, almost untraceable deception. It would keep a patient alive in an emergency, but it was a stopgap, a lie. For someone needing massive transfusions for someone whose body was already compromised, receiving the wrong, albeit compatible blood could lead to a host of complications. A slower, more anonymous kind of death. I sat there in the freezing dark, the glow of the screen illuminating the monstrous scale of it. My mother, Eleanor Vance, the woman who received the key to the city for her tireless work after the interstate pileup, the woman who held my hand while I got stitches as a kid, was a merchant of life itself. She was rationing mortality. I clicked on a file labeled Correspondence. The most recent email was from a client liaison for the Ethelred Society, a name that sounded something out of a medieval fantasy. The tone was demanding, impatient. They needed a rush order, O-negative with the Lutheran B antigen negative, for a client in Monaco. The email ended with a chillingly casual line: Standard replacement protocol the public supply can manage. As if the lives of the people in our town, the people who trusted her, were just a resource to be managed and depleted. I closed the laptop, the click echoing in the silence. The hum of the freezer felt like a predator's purr. I had to walk out of that room, lock the door behind me, and go back to my desk. I had to sit there and pretend I was still just the director's son, the summer help, and not the sole witness to a crime so profound it felt like it could unmake my entire world. The journey from the cold room back to my desk was a 100-year walk across 10 yards of linoleum. Every shadow seemed to lengthen and twist. The familiar, sterile scent of the blood bank was now cloying, thick with the smell of my own deceit. I forced my hands, which felt like clumsy, foreign attachments, to lock the bio-waste room door. The brass key felt warm against my cold skin, as if it had absorbed the heat of the secret it kept. I slid it back into the master ring, placed the ring in her dress drawer, and closed it with a soft click that sounded like a gunshot in the silent building. I sat at my own terminal for 10 minutes, staring at a spreadsheet of meaningless numbers, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I was performing normalcy for an audience of ghosts and humming machines. I had to appear as if I had done nothing more than my job. Driving home was a disorienting nightmare. The streetlights of my hometown, usually a comforting string of pearls leading me back to safety, now seemed like interrogators' lamps, exposing me. I saw the town not as my home, but as her inventory. The corner store owned by the Millers, Mr. Miller had a rare autoimmune disorder. The elementary school where my old teacher, Mrs. Gable, had a daughter with sickle cell anemia. Were they on the list? Were their lives being quietly devalued, their chances shaved away, pint by pint, to fund a life I couldn't even begin to comprehend? Every memory of my mother was now a piece of evidence in a trial happening inside my skull. Her working late wasn't dedication, it was business. Her trips to medical conferences were client meetings. Her fierce, protective love for me, was that real? Or was I just a component of her cover, the perfect son for the perfect public servant? The thought was a new kind of cold, one that seeped into my bones. I parked in the driveway of the house I grew up in, a 2-story colonial that had always been my sanctuary. Tonight, it looked like a stranger's house. A well-kept facade hiding something rotten within. I let myself in, the silence inside even more profound than the blood banks. She was in the living room, curled on the sofa under a soft throw blanket, the warm glow of a lamp illuminating the book in her lap. She looked up when I entered, and her face broke into that familiar, gentle smile. It was the same smile from the photographs on the mantelpieces, the same smile that had reassured me after every scraped knee and broken heart. Now it looked like a mask. "There you are," she said, her voice soft as cashmere. I was starting to get worried. "Everything okay at the lab?" The question hung in the air between us, heavy and lethal. My throat went dry. I could tell her. I could scream, accuse, throw the laptop on the coffee table, and demand to know how she could do it. But I saw the scene play out in my mind. Her calm, practiced denial, her look of deep, maternal hurt that I could ever think such things. She would turn it around on me. I would be the one who was exhausted, stressed from my studies, misinterpreting things. She was a master of control. I had seen her placate furious hospital administrators and charm skeptical journalists. I stood no chance. So I lied. The first of what I knew would be many. "Yeah, fine," I managed, my voice sounding hollow and distant to my own ears. "Just a server glitch with the new inventory software. Took a while to sort out." She nodded, her eyes full of what looked like genuine sympathy. "You work too hard, Ben. Just like your mother." She patted the cushion next to her. "Come. Sit for a minute. Tell me about your day." Was she proud of her son or of the successful product she had raised, the one that made her look so good? I sank onto my bed, the old mattress groaning in protest. The whole house, this whole life, was a stage set. I had been playing a part I never knew existed, and I had just stumbled backstage and seen the grime and the ropes and the gears that made the illusion work. The grief and the anger were a storm inside me, but beneath it, a cold resolve began to form. I couldn't confront her. Not yet. She was too smart, too prepared. I had seen files on a laptop, files she could claim were faked or part of a contingency plan, or 1,000 other plausible lies she could spin with that disarming smile. I needed more. I needed something she couldn't explain away. Something physical. Something that connected the sterile corporate evil of the Ethelred Society to this house, to her. I had to know how deep it went. The thought was terrifying, but not as terrifying as the alternative, doing nothing, living out the rest of my life in this beautifully decorated lie, an accomplice through my silence. I waited, listening. I heard the faint murmur of the television from the living room, the occasional rustle of the page turning. I counted to 500, my heart thudding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. Then, I slowly, silently, turned the knob on my bedroom door. The hallway was dark, save for a sliver of light from downstairs that cut across the polished hardwood floor. Her home office was at the end of the hall. It had always been her sanctuary, the one room I was implicitly discouraged from entering without an invitation. The door was slightly ajar. I pushed it open, the hinges moving with a well-oiled silence that was somehow more sinister than a creak. The room smelled of her, of old paper, and a faint floral perfume. It was the scent of my mother, and for the first time in my life, it smelled like danger. Her desk was a large mahogany thing, neat and orderly. I didn't dare turn on a lamp, using only the weak moonlight filtering through the window. I tried the main drawer. Locked, of course. I scanned the bookshelves that lined the walls, filled with medical journals and classic literature. My eyes landed on a worn, leather-bound copy of Marcus Aurelius' Meditations. It was a prop she quoted often, speaking of duty and self-control. It was a prop, just like everything else. On a hunch, I pulled it from the shelf. It was too light. I opened it, and my breath caught in my throat. The center had been hollowed out, and nestled inside was a small, antique-looking brass key. My hands were shaking so badly it took me 2 tries to fit it into the desk drawer's lock. It turned with a quiet, satisfying click. Inside, there were no incriminating ledgers or stacks of cash. There was only a single object, a small, dark wooden box no bigger than my palm, inlaid with a strange silver symbol that looked like a stylized serpent coiled into an infinity loop. I didn't recognize this logo. It felt ancient, cultish. I lifted the lid. On a bed of black velvet set a single, heavy, silver lapel pin matching the symbol on the box. It was clearly a piece of regalia, a signifier of belonging. This was it. This was the physical link. Beneath the velvet lining, my fingers brushed against the corner of something hard. I pulled it out. It was a small, black, moleskin notebook. I flipped it open. It wasn't financial records. It was a list. A list of names, but not full names, just initials. Next to each set of initials was a date and a series of letters and numbers that looked like a genetic marker, followed by a single word. Words like initiated, fulfilled, terminated. A floorboard creaked downstairs. It was a soft sound, but in the dead silence of the house, it was a thunderclap. My blood ran cold. She was getting up. I shoved the pin into my pocket, the sharp point digging into my thigh.
It was a stupid, reckless move, but I couldn't leave it. I needed it. I gently placed the notebook back under the velvet, closed the box, locked the drawer, and slid the hollowed-out book back into its precise spot on the shelf. I was a ghost, reversing my own steps, my mind screaming with every move. I slipped out of the office, pulling the door to the exact angle I had found it, and made it back into my room, closing my own door with a barely audible click. I had just leaned my back against the wood, my lungs burning, when I heard her soft footsteps ascending the stairs. They stopped directly outside my door. There was a pause, a moment of suffocating silence, and then a soft knock. Then, her voice, calm and maternal, sliced through the door. "Everything all right? I thought I heard you moving around." My throat was a desert. I swallowed, and the sound was like sandpaper. I had to answer. Silence was an admission of guilt, an invitation for her to turn the knob. I pressed my forehead against the cool wood of the door, the silver pin in my pocket a shard of ice against my skin. "Yeah, Mom," I managed, forcing a groggy, sleep-choked rasp into my voice. "Just a bad dream. Went to get some water." It was a pathetic lie, stitched together from scraps of old excuses, but it was all I had. The silence on the other side of the door stretched, pulled taut like a wire. I could feel her, picturing her standing there, head tilted slightly, analyzing the tremor in my voice, the slight hesitation before I spoke. She was listening for the lie. "Oh, sweetie, are you sure you're all right?" Her voice was pure honey, thick with concern. "I can make you some chamomile tea. We can talk about it if you want." It was an offer of comfort that felt like a trap. If I opened that door, she would see it in my eyes. She would see the theft, the betrayal, the raw terror. She knew my face better than I did. She could read the subtle shifts in muscle and mood like a text. Letting her in now would be a complete surrender. "No, it's okay," I said, a little too quickly. I softened my tone, trying to sound like I was drifting back to sleep. "Really, I'm already half gone again. Just one of those weird ones, you know?" I held my breath, praying she would accept it, that the mask of the dutiful, loving mother would be enough to satisfy the predator beneath. Another beat of silence. It was an eternity. I was certain she was going to call my bluff, to insist. Then finally, her voice came again, softer this time. "All right, Ben, get some sleep. I love you." The words were a physical blow. They were the same words she had said to me every night of my childhood, a sacred ritual. Now they sounded like a threat, a reminder of the bonds I was severing, of the world I was about to burn down. "Love you, too," I whispered to the door. I heard her footsteps retreat, a soft, measured tread down the hallway, and then the gentle click of her own bedroom door closing. The immediate danger had passed, but the house was still holding its breath. I slid down the door until I was sitting on the floor, my head in my hands, my body trembling with the aftershock of adrenaline. I stayed like that for what felt like hours, listening to the groans and sighs of the old house settling. Every sound was her coming back to check again. Finally, a fragile calm settled over me, the cold, hard calm of someone who has passed through terror and come out the other side with a singular, grim purpose. I pulled the lapel pin out of my pocket. In the faint moonlight, the silver serpent seemed to writhe, coiled in its impossible, eternal loop. It was heavy, expertly crafted. This wasn't some cheap corporate giveaway. It was a mark of fealty, a symbol of an inner circle. The Eiffel Red Society. I thought back to the notebook, the list of initials: initiated, fulfilled,
Terminated. The words echoed in my mind. Each one, a drumbeat of doom. Initiated was clear enough. They were brought into the fold, either as clients or members. Fulfilled likely meant their needs were met, a transaction completed. But terminated. That word hung in the air with the smell of formaldehyde. It couldn't just mean a contract had ended. The word was too final, too clinical. It was the word a scientist used for a failed experiment, the word an exterminator used for a pest. A cold dread, deeper than anything I had felt before, began to seep into my bones. This was bigger than black market blood sales. Selling rare blood to the rich was monstrous, but it was a crime of greed. Terminated suggested something else entirely, something that went beyond profit, into a realm of absolute power, of life and death. My mother, with her book club and her charity galas, was a part of it. This pin was my proof. This pin and the horrifying list burned into my memory. I couldn't stay here. This house was no longer a home. It was the heart of the conspiracy. I needed to get out, to find a place where I could think, where I wasn't under her roof, breathing her air. I needed to understand what that symbol meant, who the people on that list were. I couldn't use the home Wi-Fi. I had no doubt she could monitor the network traffic if she had the slightest suspicion. I needed a public library, an anonymous connection. I had to start with the names on that list, the ones marked terminated. The dates next to their initials were my only lead. I would search local obituaries, news archives, anything. I had to know if people were dying. I stood up, my joints cracking in the silence. Moving with a stealth I didn't know I possessed, I pulled on a pair of jeans and a dark hoodie. I grabbed my wallet, my keys, and the pin. I wrapped the silver serpent in a tissue and tucked it deep into my wallet's coin pouch. It felt like a radioactive isotope, a small, dense piece of a terrible truth I was now responsible for. I crept to my window, slowly, silently racing the sash. The night air was cool on my face. The drop to the lawn wasn't far. I had done it 100 times as a teenager, sneaking out to meet friends. It felt different now. I wasn't a kid escaping boredom. I was an exile, fleeing a monster I used to call Mom. I swung one leg over the sill, my body tense. My sneakers made a soft thud on the shingles of the porch roof below. For a second, I froze, listening, my heart hammering against my ribs. Silence. The house remained still, a sleeping beast that I was trying to not wake up. I slid the rest of the way out, carefully lowering the window until only a sliver of an opening remained, just as I used to leave it. The air was thick with the smell of damp earth and cut grass, a scent that had always meant home and safety. Tonight it smelled like the open air of a prison yard. I crab-walked across the shingles, my fingers gripping the rough asphalt, and lowered myself over the edge, hanging for a moment before dropping the last few feet. My landing was clumsy, a jarring thud that sent a shockwave up my spine. I crouched in the hydrangeas, scanning the dark windows of the house, expecting a light to flick on to see her silhouette appear. Nothing. I was just a shadow in the garden. I didn't take my car. The sound of the engine starting would be a gunshot in the suburban quiet. I stuck to the shadows, moving down the familiar street that now felt like a hostile alien landscape. Every rustle of leaves was her footsteps coming up behind me. Every pair of headlights that swept across the road felt like a searchlight pinning me in place. The half-mile walk to the 24-hour diner on the edge of town felt like a cross-country trek. From there, it was another mile to the public library. Its lights were off, a dark monolith against the pre-dawn sky, but I knew the side entrance had a covered alcove with a public Wi-Fi signal that reached the bench just outside. I huddled there, the cold of the concrete seeping through my jeans, and pulled out my phone. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely type in the password. The library's network was slow, but it was anonymous. My mind raced, trying to recall the exact scroll in the notebook. There were so many initials, so many dates. I had to start somewhere. I chose the most recent one I could remember, under the terminated column. L.R. The date next to it was from about 6 months ago. I typed the initials and the date into the search bar. The screen filled with irrelevant noise, local events, weather reports from that day. It was a needle in a digital haystack. I added the name of our town, Northwood, to the search. I refined it again. Northwood, obituary, L.R., and the date. My heart skipped a beat. A single result appeared. A link to the local paper's online archive. The headline was simple: Community mourns local artist. I clicked the link. The page loaded with agonizing slowness. A picture of a smiling, middle-aged woman with kind eyes and paint-splattered overalls appeared on the screen. Laura Redding, L.R. I scanned the article, my breath catching in my throat. Laura Redding, 48, a beloved local artist and teacher, passed away unexpectedly at her home. Friends reported she had been suffering from a sudden, aggressive flu-like illness. She will be remembered for her vibrant spirit and generous heart. Sudden illness. It was plausible, it happened, but it felt too neat, too clean. I scrolled back to my memory of the notebook. The entry for LR was marked fulfilled 2 weeks before she was terminated. Had her fulfillment been a delivery of blood? And was her termination a sudden, untraceable illness? A cold sweat broke out of my neck. It could be a coincidence. A tragic, horrible coincidence. I needed another one. I dredged my memory again, pulling another set of initials from the terminated list, this one from the year before. S.J. I typed it in, along with the date and Northwood. This time, the result was a brief news report about a traffic accident. Samuel Jenkins, 62, a retired accountant. His car had veered off Old Mill Road on a clear night and struck a tree. No other vehicles involved, no witnesses. He was an avid member of the local classic car club. Friends quoted in the article were baffled, saying Sam was a meticulous and careful driver who babied his vintage Porsche. He would never have been speeding on that road. He knew its every curve. Fulfilled 3 weeks prior, terminated on a dark, empty road. I sat back against the cold brick wall of the library, the phone screen glowing in the darkness. It wasn't a coincidence. It was a pattern. Sudden, inexplicable deaths that left no room for questions. A rare, fast-acting illness, a single car accident. Things that were tragic but unremarkable, destined to be forgotten by everyone except the immediate family. These people weren't just dying. They were being removed. Erased. The Aethelred Society wasn't just a club for the rich to get priority medical treatment. It was a machine that decided who lived and who died, and my mother was one of its mechanics. The blood wasn't just a commodity she sold. It was leverage. It was a tool. And when the transaction was done, when the client was fulfilled, what happened then? Were they a loose end? Did they know too much? The pin in my wallet felt like 100 pounds. This was so much worse than theft. This was a conspiracy of murder, sanctioned and hidden in plain sight. My mother didn't just sell their blood. She signed their death warrants. The world tilted on its axis. The pre-dawn chill was no longer just cold. It was predatory. It felt like the air itself was watching me, holding its breath. I shoved my phone back into my pocket, the screen going dark on Samuel Jenkins's smiling, doomed face. My stomach churned, a sour mix of cheap diner coffee and pure terror. I had to move. Sitting here, exposed on a public bench, felt like painting a target on my back. My mother would be waking up soon. She was a creature of habit, her alarm set for 5:30 a.m. sharp. She'd go to my room, find the open window, the empty bed. The hunt would begin. And she wasn't just a pillar of the community. She was methodical, intelligent, and utterly ruthless. I had seen it in her handwriting, in the cold, final scratch of the word terminated. I stumbled away from the library, my legs feeling like lead. I walked without a destination, my mind a maelstrom of fragmented thoughts. Laura Redding's paint-splattered overalls, Samuel Jenkins's vintage Porsche wrapped around a tree, the initials in the notebook, no longer just letters, but ghosts, a silent chorus of the dead. Each one had received a gift, the gift of life, delivered in a sterile bag of rare blood, and in return, they paid with their own. Why? What could they possibly know that was worth killing them for? Was it just to cover the tracks of the illegal transaction? Or was there something more? Something about the blood itself, or the people who received it. The questions were a swarm of hornets in my head, and I had no answers, only a growing certainty that I was in far over my head. I found myself on the industrial side of town, where the suburban streets gave way to warehouses and chain-link fences. A rundown motel, the Starlight Inn, flickered its neon sign against the lightning sky. The S was burnt out, so it just read, Tarlight Inn. It was perfect. Anonymous, transient, the kind of place people go when they don't want to be found. I paid for a room in cash, the night clerk barely glancing up from his crossword puzzle. The room smelled of stale cigarettes and bleach. The bedspread was a hideous floral pattern, and a single fly buzzed lazily near the ceiling. It was the safest place I had ever been. I locked the door, slid the chain across, and wedged the room's only chair under the knob. Only then did I allow myself to collapse onto the lumpy mattress. I pulled out my phone again, my fingers moving with a new, frantic purpose. I couldn't look for more victims. It was too much, and it wasn't getting me closer to the truth. I needed to know about the society itself. I typed in Ethelred Society into the search bar. The results were sparse, mostly historical references to an obscure Anglo-Saxon king, Ethelred, the Unready. There were a few mentions on fringe conspiracy forums, dismissed as ramblings about secret cabals of the elite, but nothing concrete. No website, no articles, no public face. They were ghosts, just like their victims. I tried searching for the pin, describing the silver serpent eating its own tail, Aurora Boros, a symbol of eternity, of the cycle of life and death. It was used by countless groups throughout history. It was another dead end. The frustration was a physical thing, a tightness in my chest. I was running on fumes and fear, armed with a handful of circumstantial evidence and a cryptic lapel pin. It wasn't enough. No one would believe me. I could just imagine walking into the police station. My mother, the director of the blood bank, is murdering people for a secret society of rich people. They think I was crazy. They'd call her. And then what? She would smile her calm, reassuring smile, express her deep concern for my mental well-being, and I would disappear. Maybe a sudden illness. Maybe a tragic accident. I would become just another set of initials in her ledger. I squeezed my eyes shut, and the image of the notebook appeared behind my eyelids. The neat columns, the dates, the cold, hard data. That was the proof. The obituaries, the news reports, they were just echoes. The notebook was the source. It was the weapon. It contained everything. The names of the clients, the identities of the donors who were being silenced, the dates that would line up perfectly with their accidents. It was all in that little leather-bound book, locked away in the bottom drawer of her desk at the blood bank. A place I knew like the back of my hand. A place I could get into. The thought was so terrifying it made me sit bolt upright. Go back to the center of it all? It was insane. It was suicide. But as I sat there in that cheap, musty room, the sun beginning to cast a weak, gray light through the grimy window, I realized I had no other choice. I couldn't run forever. I couldn't hide. The only way out was through. I had to get that notebook. I had to go back into the monster's den. The plan bloomed in the stale air of the motel room, a thorny, terrifying flower of necessity. It was one thing to decide to go back, another to figure out how to do it without ending up on a slab in the county morgue. I spent the day in that dingy room, the curtains drawn, watching the slivers of light shift across the stained carpet. I didn't sleep. I couldn't eat. I just paced, thinking, remembering. I'd spent countless hours at the blood bank as a kid, then as a teenage volunteer. I knew its rhythms, its floor plan, its secrets. The security system was upgraded a few years ago, but I remembered the blind spot near the rear delivery entrance, a small patch of darkness between two overlapping camera fields. I remembered the night shift security guard, a man named Henderson, who spent most of his rounds listening to late-night talk radio in the main lobby, only walking the perimeter at the top of the hour, punctual to a fault. My mother trusted routines. It was her strength, and now it had to be my weapon. The biggest problem was getting inside, but then a memory surfaced, a small, stupid detail from years ago, a spare key. After I finished my summer volunteering stint, I'd accidentally taken my key home. My mother told me not to worry about it, that she'd just have it deactivated, but she was frugal and hated waste. I had a sudden, gut-wrenching certainty that she never had. She would have just told the security company it was lost and left it at that. The key was still on my old keychain, the one with the silly plastic astronaut tucked away in the junk drawer of my nightstand back home, back in my room. The thought of going back to the house, even for a second, was nauseating. But it was the only way. The house key was on my current ring. I could be in and out in less than a minute. It was a risk, a massive one, but it was a calculated risk. A key was quiet, a key was clean. Smashing a window was a guarantee of getting caught. As dusk bled into night, I left the motel. The drive back to my own neighborhood was surreal. The familiar streets looked like a movie set, a facade of normalcy hiding a rot I could now see so clearly. I parked 2 blocks away and approached my house on foot, sticking to the shadows of the overgrown hedges. The lights were off. She was probably at one of her charity dinners, schmoozing with the city's elite, some of whom were likely members of her monstrous society. My hands shook so badly it took 3 tries to get the key in the lock. The house was silent, holding its breath. It smelled of her perfume, a faint scent of lavender and lies. I didn't dare turn on a light, using my phone's screen to navigate the geography of my own home. In my room, I rummaged through the nightstand drawer, my fingers closing around the cold metal of the astronaut keychain. I had it. I was out of the house in 30 seconds, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. The blood bank was a low, dark shape against the moonless sky. It looked like a mausoleum. I parked in the adjacent lot of a closed-down diner and watched. I waited for an hour, my nerves screaming, until I saw Henderson's flashlight beam cut through the darkness as he started his 1 a.m. patrol. This was it. I slipped out of the car, a black hoodie pulled low over my face, and moved quickly toward the rear of the building. The air was cold and smelled of antiseptic and damp concrete. I found the blind spot, pressing myself into the brick alcove of the delivery entrance. The old key slid into the lock with a sickeningly loud click. I held my breath, waiting for the shriek of an alarm, but there was only silence. She never deactivated it. I slipped inside, closing the heavy door behind me until it latched with a soft thud. The inside was even colder, the air humming with the constant drone of refrigeration units. This was the heart of my mother's empire. The place I'd once seen as a sanctuary of life-saving work now felt like a tomb. Every shadow seemed to stretch and writhe. I moved silently down the hallway, my sneakers squeaking faintly on the polished linoleum. I knew Henderson would be back in the lobby by now, his radio a low murmur. I had maybe 45 minutes. I reached her office at the end of the main corridor. The door was locked, of course. But it was a simple interior lock, one I'd seen her open with a credit card once when she had forgotten her keys. I pulled my driver's license from my wallet, the plastic thin and flimsy. It felt like trying to pick a castle lock with a feather. I slid it into the jamb, jiggling the knob, praying to a god I didn't believe in. After a few agonizingly long seconds, I felt the latch give way. Her office was immaculate, bathed in the cold blue-white glow of the computer monitor's screensaver. The faint scent of her lavender perfume was stronger here. A silver-framed photo on her desk showed the 2 of us smiling on a beach vacation years ago. Before. My stomach twisted. I ignored it, moving to the desk. The bottom right drawer. Locked. Of course. It was a sturdier lock than the one on the door. I pulled at it, but it wouldn't budge. Panic began to bubble in my throat. I looked around desperately, my eyes landing on a heavy silver letter opener on the desk, shaped like a miniature sword. I jammed the tip into the gap between the drawer and the desk frame and pried. Wood splintered. The sound was like a gunshot in the silent building. I froze, listening, my ears straining. Nothing. I pulled harder, sweat beading on my forehead. The lock gave with a final, cracking groan. I reached inside, my fingers brushing against the smooth leather cover of the notebook. I had it. My hand was closing around it when I heard it, a sound from the front of the building, the distinct metallic scrape of a key turning in the main entrance lock. My blood went cold, turning to ice in my veins. It wasn't Henderson. Henderson used the side door, and his jangling ring of keys sounded like a wind chime. This was a single, decisive key in the main entrance lock, a sound I knew as well as my own heartbeat. My hand, still inside the splintered drawer, closed around the leather-bound notebook. I didn't pull it out. I just froze, a statue in the blue light of the monitor, every muscle screaming. The heavy front door opened, then closed with a soft final click. Footsteps. Unhurried, confident, echoing on the linoleum. They were coming down the main corridor, straight toward the office. Straight toward me. There was nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. The closet was flimsy, the window was a sheer drop to the concrete below. This was it. The monster had come home to its den. I slowly pulled my hand from the drawer, the notebook feeling impossibly heavy, like a slab of granite. I stood up, my back to the desk, and faced the door just as the handle turned. The door swung inward without a sound, and she stood there, silhouetted against the dim emergency light of the hallway.
She wasn't wearing one of her elegant evening gowns. She was in a simple black pantsuit, as if dressed for a funeral. Her face was calm, her expression not one of surprise or anger, but of something far worse, disappointment, as if I'd failed a test. Her eyes flicked from my face to the splintered desk drawer, and then to the notebook in my hand. A small, tight smile touched her lips, devoid of any warmth. "I knew you wouldn't be able to let it go," she said, her voice a low, conversational murmur that was somehow more terrifying than a shout. "Your father was the same way, so principled, so breakable." She took a step into the office, letting the door swing shut behind her, plunging us into the intimate gloom lit only by the computer screen. "How did you know?" My voice was a dry rasp. I clutched the notebook to my chest like a shield. "The key?" she asked, raising a perfectly sculpted eyebrow. "I never deactivated it, of course. I thought it might be a comfort for you to have, a way back home if you ever needed it. I just never imagined you'd use it like this." She gestured vaguely at the ransacked drawer. "But I had a feeling, a mother's intuition. When I saw you weren't at the house, I knew where you'd be. You always did run toward the fire." She wasn't afraid. She wasn't even flustered. She was in complete control, and the realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. She had wanted this confrontation. She had anticipated it. This was all part of her plan. "It's over," I said, trying to inject a strength I didn't feel into my voice. "I have it all. The names, the dates, the accounts, everything." I held up the notebook. Her expression didn't change. "You have a ledger," she corrected me gently. "A book of transactions. What you call a crime, I call order. I provide a service that ensures the survival of the people who truly matter, the innovators, the leaders, the visionaries, the ones whose lives are worth more than 1,000 anonymous strangers. Do you think progress happens by accident? Do you think society runs on good intentions? It runs on blood, my child. It always has. I just made the process more efficient." She was laying her soul bare, and it was a black, twisted, empty thing. The woman who had tucked me in at night, who had kissed my scraped knees, was gone. Maybe she was never there at all. "They're not visionaries. They're vampires. And you're their ghoul, feeding them from the veins of people who came here to save lives, not to be your private stock." For the first time, a flicker of something hard and cold entered her eyes. "Be careful," she warned. Her voice dropped an octave. "You are holding the ruin of men far more powerful than you can possibly imagine. Do you really think you can just walk out of here and hand that to the police? Who do you think the police chief calls when his son needs a transplant? Who do you think the judges owe favors to? You haven't found a weapon. You found a suicide note." She took another step closer, her hands outstretched, not in aggression, but in a gesture of placation. "Give me the book. We can forget this happened. You can come home." The offer hung in the air, a poisonous vapor. The smell of lavender seemed to choke me. Home. The word was a lie. There was no home to go back to. I saw the silver letter opener on the desk behind her, its pointed tip gleaming. My escape route. My only route. "No," I said, my voice shaking but firm. In one fluid motion, I lunged, not for her, but for the desk. I grabbed the letter opener and the heavy framed photo of us on the beach. "I'm sorry," I whispered, and I hurled the photograph at the large window behind her desk. The sound of shattering glass was explosive, an ear-splitting crack that ripped through the silence of the building. The sudden, violent noise made her flinch, a rare break in her composure. It was all the opening I needed. As the building's main alarm began to shriek, a piercing, deafening wail triggered by the broken window, I bolted. I shoved past her, knocking her off balance, and sprinted out of the office. Her scream of rage and frustration was lost in the siren's cry. I ran, fueled by pure, primal terror. Down the long corridor, past the rows of humming freezers, my lungs burning, the notebook pressed so hard against my chest, I could feel its sharp corners digging into my ribs. I slammed my shoulder into the crash bar of the rear delivery door and burst out into the cold night air, the alarm still screaming behind me. I didn't look back. I just ran. Across the parking lot, my feet pounding on the asphalt, until I collapsed into the driver's seat of my car, fumbling with the keys, my entire body trembling uncontrollably. I threw the notebook onto the passenger seat and sped away, the flashing lights of the blood bank shrinking in my rearview mirror until they were just an angry red pulse in the darkness. I drove for hours, with no destination in mind, just needing the motion, the distance. The sun began to rise, painting the sky in pale shades of gray and pink. The world was waking up to a normal day, unaware of the rot festering just beneath its surface. I pulled over on a deserted stretch of highway and looked at the book sitting beside me. Its simple leather cover held a truth so monstrous it could shatter the foundations of the city, of my entire world. My mother was right. I couldn't trust anyone. The police, the courts, the media, they were all tangled in this web. I had the proof, but releasing it would mean painting a target on my own back. I would be hunted by the very people meant to protect us, and my own mother would be leading the charge. I had won the battle, but the war had just begun, and I was utterly, terrifyingly alone. If you held the truth in your hands, a truth that could burn down the corrupt world of the powerful, but you knew that setting that fire would undoubtedly consume you first, what would you do? Let us know in the comments.
Don't forget to like and subscribe. I post new stories every day.